Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Paul, I'm with the Dicey Review, and today we're going to be looking at Lucidity Six-Sided Nightmares from Renegade Game Studios and Foxtail Games. This is a 1 to 4 player game. Today we're going to be looking at the 2 to 4 player version, but we will be doing a full playthrough showcasing the solo variant as well, so make sure to check back for more of that. Lucidity comes with a number of components, including 4 turn summary cards, 4 glass sleep markers, 4 dreamer cards, 5 nightmare cards, which include 4 primary nightmares, and then 1 nightmare of temptation that you can add as a variant. You're going to have 80 dice in 4 different colors, and the game refers to these as dreams. And then you'll have 1 cotton bag to hold all of the dice in. The game also includes some larger paper sheets with the nightmare art on them as well, and these are used in the solo game. To begin setup, each player will take a dreamer card and place it in front of them with the multiplayer side face up. We've done that here. Each player will then be given a turn summary card and a glass sleep marker. The turn summaries are double-sided, and on the reverse it shows each of the dice and their distribution. Take the 4 primary nightmare cards and place them in the middle of the table. These cards are double-sided, but they're identical except for artwork. Take the 80 dream dice and place them into the bag. After this, place the bag near the playing area and you're ready to start playing. The player who last had a bad dream will go first, and then play will continue clockwise. At the end of the game, the player with the most power will win. You can see that power is represented by the dice that are placed on this bottom row. There will be dice that show a power of 1, and some dice that show a power of 2, as you can see with the red die. If a die is placed on your power row with a power of 2, leave a space in between it and the next die to show that 2 power is being used. You can see an example here. At the start of each player's turn, they will choose how deeply they want to dream. This is done by picking any one of the 3 starting points on the sleep tracks. Then you would place your glass marker on top of it. Let's say, for instance, that we wanted to start on the middle track. The player would place their marker on the 4, and then they would move to step 2 of the turn, draw and select dreams. For this step, players will draw the indicated number of dice from the bag. After doing this, 2 of the drawn dreams are selected and returned to the bag. Let's say in this instance we choose to return the blue and the red dice. After this is done, the dreams that are left are rolled and resolved. It's important to note before we move on that you may at any time spend a 1 or a 2 power from your power row to re-roll any number of unresolved dreams matching the spent dream's color. So for instance, if we spent a 1 red, we could re-roll any number of red dice as long as they are unresolved in our pool. You would place the spent dream on the nightmare that matches its color, so in this instance, the red nightmare card. Or if the nightmare card had been claimed by another player, then it would be put back in the bag. We'll explain what that means in a moment, but just know that nightmares may not be in the middle of the table depending on what happens in the game. When resolving dream dice, you always resolve them in the following order. First, resolve any power. Resolving power is simply done by placing the power dice in the power row. Next, any hunt dice will be resolved. Hunt dice are only on the red dice, and they will be resolved by placing them in the hunt row right here. Next, any exhaustion would be resolved by placing it in the exhaustion row. Finally, if there are any dice remaining with the symbol shown, these are known as shadows. Shadows can be resolved in any order, and when they're resolved, there is an immediate effect that takes place. Let's look at each one of the 4 shadows and the effects that take place when you resolve one of their dice. If you place one of the dice on the blue shadow row, you must immediately draw and roll 1 dream from the bag. This dream is selected randomly. After rolled, if it is anything other than a shadow symbol, you must resolve it immediately. If you place a die on the envy track of the shadows, you must re-roll 1 dream of the next player's choice. This is the next player in turn order. That player would select any of the dreams on your player card except for the green envy shadow. You would be forced to re-roll that die and then add it to your unresolved pool. Let's say that the player made you re-roll this power. In this instance, it would simply be added to your unresolved shadows. If you resolve a yellow shadow under the imprisonment row, you must rotate one of your exhaustion dice to its shadow face. You still leave the die in the exhaustion row, but it's harder to get rid of at the end of your turn, and we'll explain what that means in a little bit. If you resolve a shadow under the Primeval Fear shadow row, you may, if you want to, move any one of the dreams in your shadow rows to the hunt space. You wouldn't rotate the dream, you would simply move it to this space and fill up one of the empty spaces. The fourth space of the shadow rows are only used in the 2-player and single-player version of the game. In a 3 and a 4-player game, 3 shadows in any of these rows is considered a full row. If one of the shadow rows is full, but you still have unresolved dreams of that shadow's color, continue to place them in the row or next to the row and apply their effects. After resolving all of your rolled dreams, you will check to see if any of the rows on your dreamer card are filled in the following order. First, check the hunt row. If you have 4 or more dreams in your hunt row, you are eliminated from the game. Return all dreams on your card to the bag, and you do not take further turns. There are still various abilities in the game that will consider you as the next player, however, even if you're out of the game. After checking the hunt row, check the exhaust row. If you have 3 or more dreams in your exhaust row, you're exhausted. You have to draw one random dream from the bag, and then return any power on your power row that match that dream's color, along with the drawn dream to the bag. So in this instance, these 2 green power and the drawn green die would be returned to the bag. You can't dream again if you're exhausted. You have to rest and end your turn. You might, however, still become a nightmare. We'll go over what that means now. If you have 3 or more dreams in any shadow row, or if you have 4 or more in a 2-player game, you become a nightmare. You always become the nightmare whose color matches your most filled shadow row. If there's a tie between your most filled shadow row, as there is here, you choose the nightmare that you become. If you become a nightmare, remove all of the dice on your player card except for the 1 and 2 power dice in your power row. Take the matching nightmare card, along with any power dice that are on the card that have been placed there by previous players. This power will be added to your power row. If you have become a nightmare, your turn will then end, and in future turns you will play as a nightmare. We'll look at what happens on a nightmare turn in a moment. If you've checked all of the previously mentioned rows and none of these conditions have been met, you might be able to dream again, or you might be forced to rest. If your exhaust row is filled, or if you are at the end of your chosen sleep track, you must rest. When you rest, you regain some control over your dreams. You can either return 1 die showing a shadow symbol, or you can return all of the dice showing exhaustion symbols. If you're not exhausted and have not yet reached the end of your chosen sleep track, you can choose to dream again. When you dream again, you press your luck and move to the next space of your chosen dream track. It's important to note that you must stay in the initial dream track that you chose. When you do this, you complete another turn starting with the draw and select dream step, but this time you draw more dreams. In this instance, 8 dice from the bag. If a player has claimed a nightmare card, they are considered a nightmare. Nightmare players are not considered dreamer players, and on their turn, they have one of 2 options. The first option that a nightmare player has on their turn is to consume power. So let's say that it's this player's turn. This player has become the Nightmare of the Depths. When you consume power, you can take 1 power die of your color from any other player's power row. It doesn't matter if the other player is a nightmare or a dreamer. So in this instance, this player could either take 1 of the blue dice from this player's power row or from this player's power row. They would take the blue die, place it in their own power row, and then end their turn. The other option that a nightmare player has on their turn is to send minions to attack a dreamer. So for instance, the blue player on their turn, if they didn't want to consume power, could choose to draw 2 random dice from the bag, return 1, and give the one that's not returned to a dreamer. This player would need to roll the die and resolve it immediately. Then the nightmare player would end their turn. Becoming a nightmare will also give the nightmare player a special ability. These special abilities will be activated whenever dreamer players resolve certain symbols on dice matching the nightmare player's color. So for instance, if a player has become a Nightmare of the Depths Anytime a dreamer player rolls a blue shadow symbol, the player who's become the Nightmare of the Depths can move that die to their card as a power, then draw 2 dreams from the bag, return 1 to the bag, and then the dreamer rolls the other. These abilities are very powerful, and each Nightmare card has a different special ability. For instance, the Nightmare of Imprisonment would trigger if a dreamer player resolves a shadow or an exhaustion symbol on a yellow die. The Nightmare of Primeval Fear would trigger if a dreamer would resolve a shadow or a hunt symbol on a red die. And the Nightmare of Envy triggers if a dreamer player resolves a shadow or an exhaustion symbol on a green die. At the end of any player's turn, if a player, whether they be a Nightmare or a Dreamer, has 15 or more power, every other remaining Dreamer player takes a final turn and then the game ends. At the end of the game, the player, whether they be Nightmare or Dreamer with the most power, would win. If all of the Dreamer players have been eliminated, then the Nightmare with the most power would win, in this instance, the Nightmare of the Depths. If there are ever no dice left in the bag, the player who drew the last dice will roll and resolve these dice, finishing their turn, and then the player with the most power wins. In the event of a tie, the tied players pick up and roll all of their power dreams. They keep any power rolled and return the rest to the bag. They will continue until one of the tied players has more than the other and wins the game. This gives you all the information you need to play a multiplayer game. There's also a single player variant, which I will cover in a full playthrough in a later video. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching. That was our video. We hope that it was helpful and we hope that it was informative. If you still have questions about how to play the game, make sure to leave a comment below or email us at thedicey@gmail.com. If you want to hear more from the Dicey Review, you can listen to the Dicey Review podcast. It can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and SoundCloud. You can always read our written reviews over at thedicey.review.com or connect with us at our Board Game Geek Guild under the Dicey Review podcast. Until next time, we'll see you at the table.